Adventure and action. That's one side of the Camel Trophy. And this is the other, the normal side. The side which expresses the philosophy behind the Camel Trophy, uniting people as part of an international group of amateurs, overcoming together the most difficult obstacles, surviving the most exhausting conditions, accomplishing the most unbelievable tasks. Teamwork and helping one another to reach the finish together is what the Camel Trophy is all about. Every year for the past 10 years, these virtues have been put to the test, and the Camel Trophy gains more support every year. It's 1980. 3 German teams start out on the first Camel Trophy through the jungle of the Brazilian Amazon. They can have no idea what their adventure will lead to. For 12 days, the drivers and their backup teams fight their way along the Trans-Amazonica from Belém to Santarém. For 1,000 miles, the drivers endure the tortures of quagmire and mud, extreme heat and humidity, and often for hours on end, the ubiquitous and extremely irritating fine red sand. And they do it in ordinary Jeeps, which look rather like toys against today's specially equipped trophy vehicles. The most difficult situations occur when the jungle has managed to reclaim the road. Breaking through the apparently impenetrable barrier is exhausting work. In 1981, the second Camel Trophy takes place close to the equator, on Sumatra in Indonesia, the world's 5th largest island. This second run has already stimulated tremendous interest, and not only among the local population. Before a final selection of the 5, still exclusively German, 2-man teams taking part here, the flood of applications in Germany led to the conception of a truly international Camel Trophy. For the first time, Range Rovers are used to cover the 1,000 miles from Medan to Yamai. They and the 10 participants perform extremely well on the arduous route, from the volcanic mountains in the north to the tropical swamps of the south. After experiencing abrupt climatic changes for most of the journey, everyone reaches the finish safely. The greatest difficulties which the all-wheel drive vehicles have to contend with are the dirty, muddy sections, which are extremely hard to assess, and where getting stuck involves hours of rescue work. In 1982, The Camel Trophy participants land in Papua New Guinea. The welcome is overwhelming and the media interest enormous. This is the first time that the 1,000-mile Camel Trophy adventure is held with international participation. There are 8 two-man teams, 2 each from Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and the United States. This time a draw is held to allocate the 8 Range Rovers so that each team starts with the same chances. And for the first time, a number of special tests have been included to determine the winner. But the emphasis of the Camel Trophy remains on teamwork for this first international competition. Without it, there is little chance of completing the arduous course, which stretches from the mountainous countries of Mount Hagen down to the coast in Madang. And the members of the over 700 local tribes lend enthusiastic support. Even when a bridge swept away by the river causes a trophy competitor for once to attempt something more than he or his vehicle can manage. It soon becomes clear that the roof load must be carefully packed and secured, because apart from the bridges and rivers in Papua New Guinea, the mountain roads, which date back to colonial times, cause the competitors plenty of trouble. They're embellished with a variety of treacherous humps, ditches, and potholes that put heavy demands on vehicles and driving skills. The Italians Cesare Giraldo and Giuliano Giungo prove to be the most adroit. They win the first international Camel Trophy. The fourth Camel Trophy is the first time the event is held in Africa, more precisely in Zaire, the former Belgian Congo. And for the first time, Land Rovers equipped with roll bars, roof racks, and winches are used on the 1,000-mile journey from Kinshasa to Kisangani, through the middle of the jungle. 7 countries are now represented with teams from Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, Switzerland, and Hong Kong. The extreme climatic conditions, 45 degrees Celsius in the shade, 95% relative humidity, and the difficulties presented by the route make the fourth Camel Trophy one of the severest ever, and one of the most dangerous. As a journalist is trying to make tea on the boiling hot bonnet of a Land Rover, there's a sudden burst of flame. Within moments, the whole Land Rover is ablaze. By courageously towing away the flaming wreck, the fire can be stopped from spreading to the village. But the vehicle is a write-off. The most frequent cause of time loss in this event are vehicles that have turned over. Tiring rescue actions are the result, but the Camel Trophy family nevertheless reaches the finish. The victors, who have accumulated the most points in the special tests, are the Dutch pair, Henk Bont and Frans Hey. Apart from the exhausting climatic conditions and the jungle problems, which have come to be almost typical of the Camel Trophy, here in Zaire, the main problem is the extremely bad condition of the roads, which demand the utmost of the competitors. Whether the surface is rock-hard sand or knee-deep mud, the vehicles are continually having to be driven in an inclined state, very close to the turnover point. The Camel Trophy returns to Brazil on the occasion of its 5th anniversary, but finds very different conditions from those in 1980. Instead of sand, dust, and drought, the competitors arrive in Santarém during the rainy season, and the 12 two-man teams from Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, Switzerland, Spain, and Belgium have to come to terms with the effects of the rains during the whole 2 weeks. The journey from Santarém, the finishing point of the 1980 Camel Trophy, and Manaus, riverport capital of Amazonas state, turns out to be one long mud bath. Once again, the Land Rover proves to be the complete off-road vehicle. Perhaps it's not surprising that a resourceful organizer faces the competitors with a special task, which involves reversing through a quagmire. Of course, the teams don't master the special problems that this presents with equal elegance. The adventurers only get some peace and quiet when it proves necessary to load everyone onto a ferry. It's not only the participants who arrive in Manaus in a somewhat battered condition. Some of the vehicles have suffered too. Once again, extraordinary team spirit has made the almost impossible possible. And another Camel Trophy has a happy ending. The Italians Maurizio Lavi and Alfredo Redaelli gathered most points in the special tasks and win this year's trophy. There were many occasions on the journey when it seemed doubtful that the teams would get to Manaus at all. Never before had the drivers and backup teams needed to work so hard just to achieve progress. Some stretches of the Trans-Amazonica, the world's longest road, have been washed away by swollen rivers. Team spirit and resilience are put to a severe test when a bridge that has been erected after many hours' hard work is swept away again within seconds. Courage, the readiness to take risks, and mental strength are needed to master such situations. And of course, a number of winches, especially though the ability to use them properly to achieve maximum effect with minimum technical effort. A new bridge, no less. And then the anxious moment arrives. Will the bridge hold or won't it? Must a Camel Trophy be terminated prematurely for the first time? Will we do it or won't we? Success. In 1985, the Camel Trophy returns to Indonesia. The event is held on the world's second largest island, Borneo. The local inhabitants welcome the biggest Camel Trophy armada so far. 16 teams from Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, Switzerland, and for the first time, from Brazil and Japan. And the interest is tremendous. Borneo provides the usual Camel Trophy scenes, dealing with difficult road conditions, helping each other to overcome minor and major problems, heat, stress. But the helicopter air bridge, which is needed to get everyone over a flooded swamp, is totally unexpected. And it means that a lot of extra work is necessary. To save weight, all the baggage and the Land Rover doors have to be taken off and put back on again. It's a welcome relief to be able to enjoy the periods of relaxation, which are also part of the Camel Trophy, the world's last true adventure. The 1,000 miles between Samarinda and Balikpapan are the most arduous so far, and that's due to the water. At the end of the rainy season, most of the Indonesian province of Kalimantan is more or less underwater. The interaction between man and machine is nowhere more important than under these conditions. Heinz Kalin and Bernd Strodach from Germany win this year's Camel Trophy. And the participants vote the Brazilian team, the one most ready to help. So they win the Team Spirit Award, presented this year for the first time. After the Water Trophy in Borneo, Australia has something new to offer for 1986. Enchanting scenery, solitary driving for days on end in complete seclusion, across the grassy plains and savanna, and through the forests and deserts in the north of the fifth continent. A record 14 countries are participating this year, but with just one team from each country. Although Australia is known as the world's driest continent, the Camel Trophy competitors again have plenty of trouble with water. They lose a whole day being ferried across a river in rubber dinghies. Another trophy first. But it turns out to be the most amusing, most romantic, and most lively Camel Trophy to date. The 1986 Camel Trophy comes to an end in Darwin with a boisterous victory celebration for the French winners, Jacques Membre and Michel Courvalet, and the Australian winners of the Team Spirit Award, Glenn Jones and Ron Begg. The most headaches on the Australian Trophy are caused by driving in sand. Whether steep, fissured, or soft, the competitors are continually having to come to terms with this treacherous driving surface, sometimes more intensively than they reckoned with. After 4 Land Rover years, Range Rovers are used again for the 8th Camel Trophy in Madagascar. Teams from 14 countries again experience the meeting of different cultures and civilizations. And of course, the contest between machine and nature. Crossing this equatorial island in the Indian Ocean from north to south, between Diego Suarez and Port Dauphin presents the competitors with plenty of typical Camel Trophy challenges. The climate again provides major problems, because within seconds the weather can switch from sunshine to torrential rain. Any kind of hat is good enough to keep the worst of the rain off. But also in Madagascar, by exhausting every possibility and drawing on their last resources of imagination, all 14 teams managed to reach the finish in Port Dauphin. With Mauro Miele and Vincenzo Tota, an Italian team win the Camel Trophy for the 3rd time, and the Spaniards Puig and Mutane are voted the most helpful team. One of the special tasks in Madagascar consists of trying to climb a steep slope following a short run-up on the flat. The time is recorded, and points are awarded to each competitor based on how he approaches and executes the task. Some teams, such as the Japanese, have every reason to be pleased with their showing. And the Swiss too look confident after having completed this special task. But others are less successful. By choosing Sulawesi, the former Celebes, for the 9th Camel Trophy, Indonesia becomes the host country for the 3rd time. With its more than 1,300 islands, equatorial situation, and sparse population, Indonesia offers ideal conditions for the Camel Trophy, well away from civilization. On the journey from Manado to Ujung Pandang, there are nevertheless a number of opportunities to use the Land Rovers to help the local inhabitants. For the most part, though, the competitors are kept busy with their own problems, because Sulawesi, with its fissured, almost inaccessible mountainous terrain, provides an unprecedented test of endurance for man and machine. The Belgians have a frightening experience as their vehicle only just comes to rest on the edge of a precipice. And the shock of this experience takes time to wear off. There is no alternative but to tow the damaged vehicle in sandwich. A complete differential is replaced in a single night. Camel Trophy participants have to reckon with all kinds of repair situations. The Turkish dentist Galip Gürel uses an epoxy adhesive to mend a broken tooth. Galip is not just good at fixing teeth, he also knows a thing or two about off-road driving. He and his fellow countryman Ali Devetsi win the 9th Camel Trophy. The Britons Benson and Day receive the Team Spirit Award. Patience is the quality required in the rugged mountainous terrain of Sulawesi. Patience to drive slowly. So progress is a painstaking business, measured in yards. It has to be, otherwise damage is inevitable. Using force or speed will have unwelcome consequences. Either the vehicle will be damaged or the driver. The joys of off-road driving and mastering a four-wheel drive vehicle are being discovered by more and more people, too. So this review of 10 years of the Camel Trophy will be combined with 10 off-road driving lessons, a Range Rover Vogue Automatic, a Land Rover 110 Turbo Diesel, and a Camel Trophy veteran that survived the 1988 Sulawesi adventure are our partners. First, some basic rules for off-road driving. Engage the low-range gear and lock the central differential before you drive in difficult terrain. Always use the pedals extremely sensitively, avoiding abrupt movements. Brake only when absolutely necessary. Use the clutch only when stopping or changing gear, not forgetting to take your foot completely away from the clutch pedal again, so that you don't depress it inadvertently when the going gets rough, and then lose control of the vehicle. Hold the steering wheel in both hands, but don't put your thumbs inside, or driving over a pothole could be very painful. Above all, take to heart the most important rule of off-road driving. Drive as slowly as possible, as fast as necessary. The Camel Trophy is awarded to the best driver, not the fastest. In the extremely difficult conditions which are a part of this event, the speed rule has proved itself over and over again. As slowly as possible, as fast as necessary. If you should ever find yourself in the position of having to drive through a wood or heavy undergrowth where there is no road, it's always worth taking the trouble to check out the terrain beforehand. to find the route which will do least damage to vehicle and nature. Stop and explore on foot. Determine your exact route. Pay a special attention to the nature of the ground beneath the undergrowth, so when driving through you avoid deep holes, bogs, and other obstacles. Select the gear which is most appropriate for the type of ground and its inclination, and drive as slowly and as smoothly as possible into the critical area. Follow your chosen route as closely as you can, taking care to steer clear of tree roots and large stones. If you're forced to drive over small trees or bushes, do so at the same very low speed. This minimizes damage to both vehicle and nature. Especially important, if you have to drive over an obstacle and you're driving a Land or a Range Rover, try to keep the obstacle on the left side of the vehicle because there is slightly more ground clearance than on the right, where the differential is located. If you have followed all these instructions carefully, you will have done everything possible to limit the damage which can occur in such situations, and you can drive home without any worries. A muddy surface requires a slightly higher speed than a dry one. Wherever possible, stay in the tracks of previous vehicles. Try to avoid steering into any slight slides in order to correct them, because the vehicle will normally stay on course, despite a certain amount of side slippage. If the steering lock is high, you must reckon with the fact that the vehicle is liable to slide on for a while in the tracks before suddenly moving sideways. You lose momentum getting back on course. The drive becomes uneven and irregular, and the danger of getting bogged down increases. Furthermore, driving this way puts excessive strain on the suspension. On the other hand, if you steer lightly through the mud at constant speed, you will discover that the only effect on the vehicle is a mud bath, easily removable by a good wash. In extreme cases, you can also reduce tire pressure. This will improve the flex characteristics of the tires and hence their self-cleaning ability. Traction will be improved and the tendency to sink into the mud reduced. The general rule is that humps should be driven over at right angles and ditches crossed diagonally. This ensures the best possible coordination between axles, springs, and transmission. Here again, the rule is do everything as slowly as possible. Channels and gullies should be negotiated in such a way as to keep the vehicle level. The individual stages. Approach the hump vertically so that the wheels stay on the ground. Then turn to the right and cross the ditch diagonally. 3 wheels provide sufficient traction here. Another right-angled approach to the next hump. And then on the level again, drive slowly along a gully. There's room for a complete camera team underneath. The whole thing again together. Hump at right angles. Ditch diagonally. The second hump. And the gully. A series of humps can be crossed at right angles as long as there's no danger of the chassis making contact with the ground. And that can happen a lot quicker than one might think. Note how, with the camera in exactly the same position, this part can be negotiated at an angle without any problem. However, trying to apply the same theory on a quite different surface, such as sand, will prove to be useless. A sand dune like this, for example, cannot be conquered by driving at right angles or diagonally, and certainly not by driving slowly. In no time at all, the wheels have burrowed their way into the soft sand, and the maneuver has to be broken off. So far, we've been using the first part of the speed rule, drive as slowly as possible. But now it's time to apply the second part, drive as fast as necessary. Then it can be done. Under normal circumstances, you will not come near this point of no return. A natural internal sense of balance will prevent you from coming too close to the turnover point, let alone from going beyond it. However, you must pay very careful attention to the road's surface and avoid any parts where the vehicle could slide. Where lateral clearance is tight, it's not enough to stop the vehicle from slipping sideways. If the direction of inclination changes from one side to the other, the highest point on the vehicle can swing over a very long way. You must learn to anticipate such a situation in good time and allow for it. If the surface is slippery as well, whether frozen or soft, muddy or sandy, both factors, the risk of slipping and the increased list, have to be allowed for. A wide gap in which you could normally park without any trouble suddenly becomes very narrow indeed. At the top, there's plenty of room, but at the bottom, there's not enough space to maneuver. Incautious use of the brake is all it takes to ensure that you fail. Don't be too proud to admit such a mistake early enough to start again from the beginning, before you get stuck. A slope is especially tricky to deal with when the ground is sand. The very uneven loading of the wheels takes effect much more quickly. The vehicle begins to slip downwards, and steering corrections are all but impossible. And then you may not be able to save the situation by reversing. Not a very pleasant place to park. Always think twice before attempting to cross an area which is likely to involve extreme vehicle inclination. It's preferable to abort a maneuver rather than get stuck. Otherwise, you'll need the advice in our next chapter on winching, earlier than you might have wished. If your off-road vehicle is equipped with a winch, you can do all sorts of things. But hauling tree trunks is not likely to be one of them. So let's concentrate on using the winch for rescue work. When running it out, keep the winch cable under tension so that it doesn't get tangled. Position your vehicle as far as possible in the direction from which you wish to pull the damaged vehicle, and make sure the cable is attached to it at the right point. Steer the vehicle being rescued so that it always points straight at the winch. Keep checking that the cable is being wound up cleanly, but don't get too close. A snapped cable can cause nasty injuries. If the power is insufficient, you can use a snatch block to construct a makeshift block and tackle. This simple expedient has the effect of doubling the power of your winch. Where a lot of power is needed, secure the winch vehicle properly. And one cannot stress this point too much. Keep well away from the cable, especially when a lot of power is required. If a firm anchor point is available, you can also get yourself out of a tricky situation. Like Baron Munchausen, who claimed to be able to lift himself by his own hair, you can literally pull yourself out of trouble. If at all possible, reinforce the winching effect by using the engine. and try to find someone to keep an eye on the cable as it winds up. When you have finished, clean the cable thoroughly and wind it up carefully. Always use suitable heavy-duty gloves because hairline cracks in the steel cable can cause unpleasant hand injuries. By looking after the cable in this way, you will ensure that it is always ready to deal with a sudden emergency, like the predicament into which our camera team have managed to get themselves. With a diesel-powered Camel Trophy Land Rover, one can, in principle, drive through almost any depth of water. In principle. The essential requirement is that one can get out the other side. The best snorkel in the world, you can see it at the front near the windscreen, is not much use otherwise. And wheel-deep water poses no problem for a petrol engine model. However, you should be sure that this depth will not be exceeded. So it pays to check this as well as the nature of the ground beneath the water before proceeding. If you want to go any deeper than this, you will need to prepare your Land or Range Rover accordingly. Screwed into a threaded dummy hole in the timing chain housing, you will find a plug. Unscrew it and use the plug as a seal to keep water out of the timing chain housing. You will find a discharge plug in the tool roll. Screw this into the flywheel housing or the clutch housing to prevent the grease being washed out and dirty water entering the housing and damaging the clutch. Finally, loosen the fan belt to avoid the extra resistance generated by a submerged fan. Now you can go in above the wheels, but no further than headlight depth. And if you adjust your speed until there is a trough behind the bow wave, the ignition system and the air filter will stay dry. Avoid crossing flowing water at right angles, but try to do so at an angle of about 45 degrees. The current will have a much smaller surface to act on. Here, too, you must pay attention to the nature of the ground beneath the water and adapt your speed accordingly. Mud demands a brisk speed, whereas stony ground, as in this example, should be taken more slowly. After taking your bath, don't forget to retighten the fan belt and open the plugged holes again. Above all, though, check the brakes, because wet brake linings don't always grip properly. Driving on a level surface across virgin sand looks easy enough, inviting even. But as soon as there's a slight gradient or downward slope, the problems begin. The wheels start to spin and quickly dig in. The first thing to do is to reduce tire pressure. This is a fully inflated tire. If the pressure is reduced to about 15 pounds per square inch, it spreads out perceptibly and increases the contact area, and the tire adapts much better to the ground surface. Even with reduced tire pressure, driving in sand is still tricky. Sudden movements of the steering wheel, for example, will immediately result in a loss of speed. The vehicle will stop, and then you're stuck. In this case, the steady and not too low speed that is recommended for driving in sand proves unsuccessful, as was demonstrated in the lesson on incline driving. It looks as though the blinker knew what was going to happen. When driving in sand, at all costs, try to prevent the vehicle from coming to a standstill. Have the courage to reduce the steering lock if a slip should start to develop, and work with sensitive feet and not too much throttle. Then you might make it. Just. Before attempting to drive up a particularly steep slope, estimate its length and gradient and select the appropriate gear, which will usually be second or third. Get up to speed on the level so that you can ease off the accelerator when climbing. This will help to prevent the wheels spinning. If you don't reach the top because you've picked the wrong gear or the going is slippery, don't just brake and lock the wheels. You won't always slide down as easily as this. The vehicle is out of control. It's much better to stall the engine, immediately engage reverse gear, release the clutch completely, restart the engine, and steer your way back down in a controlled manner. If you're successful on the next attempt, avoid driving over the summit too quickly. You don't know what might be waiting for you. Before driving down the other side, get out and check that the road at the bottom is clear. When you're at the top of a steep hill, the bonnet blocks your view downwards, and beyond the tip-over point, it may be too late. After making your check, always engage first gear and roll slowly down to the bottom without braking. It may even be necessary to use the accelerator to avoid slipping, but never the brake. If you need to negotiate a bend on a steep incline, simply combine the two components. You drive up as fast as necessary, arrive at the highest point as slowly as possible, change down into first gear and roll down to the bottom without braking. Don't be too proud to stop on the summit to change gear, but be careful not to let the higher of the two front wheels go up the bank or over any other obstacle. This is the only thing that could be dangerous at the highest point, because when the vehicle is at such an extreme angle, a stone is all that's necessary to shift the center of gravity enough for you to turn over. And that's a very important lesson. Bumpy and stony surfaces simply have to be taken at snail's pace. Suspension and springs are built to take it, but not if you have a heavy foot. Even at this speed, you should try either to steer clear of the larger obstacles or drive over them with the wheels. Because as you know, there's not a lot of room to spare underneath the vehicle. But don't forget, do it slowly. And here too, you should take the path of least resistance, in the interests of both vehicle and environment. It's no use knocking your head against a wall. Gentle, slow, and smooth driving is called for here. Driving this way will ensure that you reach the finish in one piece. And then you can think about applying for the next Camel Trophy qualifying test. Because now that you've successfully completed this course of lessons, you're well equipped, at least in terms of driving skills. Yes, you're quite right. The 10th Camel Trophy is not being held in Europe. It's returning to its birthplace, the jungles of Brazil. But snow and ice would be very suitable to test the characteristics of man and machine that are necessary in the jungle. Strength, skill, endurance, and improvisational skills. A Range Rover can also do more than other vehicles in snow and ice. But even it can't do everything. On snow and ice, physical laws also apply to a four-wheel drive vehicle. You can't take a corner any faster than with a conventional vehicle. You'll just drift out. And at full throttle on packed snow or ice, all four wheels will simply spin. When you brake, you'll slide just as helplessly on locked wheels over the ice as, well, you can see for yourself. Even a four-wheel drive is no use with locked wheels. In snow, you should take a lesson from the farmer with his bull. Give way and use sensitivity of hand and foot to make it go the way you want. For example, when driving uphill, use minimum throttle in the highest gear possible. And don't drive too fast, but at a speed that enables you to negotiate corners without skidding. Whatever you do, don't accelerate away from the corner too sharply. It doesn't take much to develop wheel spin, and then you're in trouble. Keep your foot off the brake when driving downhill. But if you can't avoid it and you start to slide, release the brake immediately and try to bring the vehicle under control by steering carefully and pumping the brake. The safest way of driving downhill in these conditions with a four-wheel drive vehicle is to do so in the lowest gear that allows you to regulate speed with the throttle without having to touch the brakes. And the same applies to taking downhill corners as when driving uphill. Because of their high center of gravity, off-road vehicles are particularly liable to slide. So let's imagine that one of the next Camel Trophies will take place in the Alps, the Rocky Mountains, or the Himalayas. There will be a great number of tricky driving problems to solve, as well as physical hardships. Icy cold instead of sweltering heat, snowstorms instead of monsoon rains. But for all the hardship, there will also be moments of great satisfaction and happiness, wonderful scenery, and unforgettable encounters. And maybe there will be a special task involving crossing an expanse of flat snow, where a four-wheel drive vehicle will have less trouble than a conventional vehicle, but where it's very important to judge the snow depth correctly, to choose the correct route, and to use the correct speed. In short, where only the best off-road driver will be successful. And there will certainly also be situations comparable to those we now know, from water, quagmire, and jungle. Situations that cause a vehicle to get stuck. The film crew applied the basic principle of the Camel Trophy philosophy and solved the problem in the right way, by using teamwork. Perhaps this film has made you feel that you would like to take part in a Camel Trophy. So why not apply?